Prologue, The Last Breath. The hospital room was cold, sterile, and smelled of antiseptic and regret. The machines beeped with a steady, monotonous rhythm, marking the seconds of Lola's life as they slipped away. I sat beside her bed, my hand wrapped around hers, my eyes burning with unshed tears. She was 82 years old. We had been married for 57 years, and we had spent every single one of them bickering, arguing, and driving each other crazy. "I told you, Dan," she whispered, her voice weak but still sharp. "You're still too thin, still too pale. You look like a ghost. I'm going to find a handsome, muscular man in the afterlife, and I'm going to spend eternity with him." I laughed, a wet, broken sound. "Lola, even in death, you can't stop being annoying." Her smile was weak but genuine. "Promise me something. Dan, promise me you'll find someone who takes better care of you, someone who cooks for you, someone who doesn't yell at you every time you leave your socks on the floor." "I promise," I said, my voice cracking. "But you need to promise me something too. Promise me you'll find someone who loves you the way I do." She squeezed my hand. "I already did, you idiot. I just spent 57 years pretending I didn't." Her eyes fluttered closed. Her grip loosened. And I knew she was gone. I stayed there for a long time, holding her hand, sobbing silently. I thought about all the years we had wasted, all the arguments, all the petty grievances, all the times we had refused to admit how much we loved each other. "I'm sorry, Lola," I whispered. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you more. I'm sorry I didn't show you more. I'm sorry I was too proud to admit that you were the only thing that ever mattered." And then the world went black. ##### Chapter 1. The Second Chance. Objective commentary. The Observer's Voice. My name is Dr. Eleanor Vance, and I am a clinical psychologist, and I have studied the phenomenon of near-death experiences for over 30 years. I have interviewed countless patients who claim to have seen the other side, who claim to have spoken to the dead, who claim to have been given a second chance at life. I have always been skeptical, until I met Dan. Dan was a patient in my care after a sudden cardiac arrest. He had been clinically dead for 3 minutes, and when he woke up, he was a different person. He was calmer, more focused, more determined. He told me he had seen something, a vision of a life he had lived and lost. He told me he had been given a chance to do it all over again. I didn't believe him at first. I assumed it was the oxygen deprivation, the trauma, the desperate need to make sense of what had happened. But then, he started to tell me about a girl. A girl he had loved for 57 years, a girl he had been too proud to admit he loved until it was too late. And he told me about the day he woke up, the day he found himself back in high school, back in the body of his 16-year-old self. He told me that the first thing he saw was Lola, and he told me that he knew, with absolute certainty, that he had been given a second chance. The day I woke up, I was 16 again. I looked in the mirror and saw the face of a boy I barely remembered, young, pale, unassuming. I was sitting in the back of the classroom, the same classroom I had sat in 57 years ago. The same desks, the same chalkboard, the same smell of old paper and cheap disinfectant. And sitting 2 rows ahead of me, her hair tied back in a messy ponytail, her eyes fixed on the front of the room, was Lola. She was 16 too, young, vibrant, full of the fire I had grown to love and hate in equal measure. She was wearing a faded t-shirt and a scowl, the same scowl she had worn every day of high school. I watched her, and I felt my heart ache with a longing I had never allowed myself to feel before. I loved her. I had always loved her. I had just been too proud, too stubborn, too afraid to admit it. I watched her laugh at something her friend said. I watched her roll her eyes at the teacher. I watched her glance back at me. Just for a moment, her expression unreadable. And then the transfer student walked in. He was tall, dark, and handsome, everything I was not. His name was Alexander, and within moments of arriving, he had captured the attention of every girl in the room, including Lola's. I watched him approach her at lunch. I watched him stammer through a confession. I watched her smile, that infuriatingly beautiful smile, and I waited for her to say the words I had heard before. "Sorry, you're not my type." But she didn't say those words. She looked at me instead, her eyes narrowing, her smile turning sly and challenging. And then she said it. "Let's give it a try." #### Chapter 2. The Game. Objective commentary. The Observer's Voice. When Dan told me about the rejection, I was confused. Why would Lola, a woman he had been married to for 57 years, reject him? Why would she choose the transfer student over him? But then, Dan told me the rest of the story. Lola had been given a second chance too. She had woken up in her 16-year-old body, just like him. She remembered everything. The years of bickering, the marriage, the death. She remembered the things she had said, the things she had done, the things she had regretted. And she was determined not to repeat her mistakes. You see, Dan explained, Lola had always loved me. She had always wanted to be with me, but she was stubborn, too. She had never forgiven me for being too proud to confess my feelings first. She wanted me to fight for her. She wanted me to prove that I loved her, and she knew that the only way to make me fight was to make me jealous. I stared at him, stunned. "She's playing games with you?" "Call it what you want," he said. But it worked. I was furious. I was jealous. I was determined to win her back, no matter what it took. I couldn't believe it. Lola was dating Alexander. The girl who had been married to me for 57 years was dating the transfer student. The same transfer student who had, in the original timeline, been rejected. I confronted her in the hallway after school. my heart pounding, my hands shaking. "What are you doing, Lola?" I demanded. "What are you playing at?" She smiled, the same sly, challenging smile she had worn at lunch. "I'm not playing at anything, Dan. I'm just living my life. You don't have to worry about me." "I do have to worry," I said, my voice cracking. "Because I love you. I've always loved you. And I'm not going to let you throw that away." She tilted her head, her eyes glinting with amusement. "You love me? Since when? You spent our entire marriage refusing to say it." I felt the blood drain from my face. "You remember." "I remember everything," she said, her voice soft but firm. "I remember the hospital room. I remember the last thing you said to me. I love you. It was the first time in 57 years you said those words to me." I couldn't speak. I just stood there, frozen, waiting for her to judge me. "I'm not judging you, Dan," she said, reading my mind. I'm trying to understand. If you loved me all along, why did you wait until I was dead to say it?" I swallowed hard. Because I was scared. Because I was proud. Because I thought you knew. I thought the years of arguing, of fighting, of driving each other crazy was proof enough. She laughed. It was the same laugh I had heard a million times, the one that made me fall in love with her all over again. "You're an idiot, Dan. You're a complete and utter idiot." "I know," I said. "And I'm sorry. I'm sorry for all the wasted years. I'm sorry for all the times I refused to say it. I'm sorry for making you wait until the very end to hear the truth." She reached out and took my hand. Her fingers were warm, familiar, perfect. "Then don't waste this one," she said. "Don't wait until the end to say it. Say it now. Say it every day. And if you're lucky, I might just forgive you." ##### Chapter 3, The Chase. Objective commentary. The Observer's Voice. Dan and Lola's second chance was not easy. They had 57 years of baggage to unpack, decades of pride and stubbornness to overcome, but they were determined. They were going to get it right this time. Lola continued to date Alexander, but it was a calculated move. She wanted to see if Dan would fight for her, if he would prove that he loved her enough to overcome his pride. And he did. He fought for her. He showed up at her door with flowers, with apologies, with the words he had been too afraid to say for decades. He told her he loved her every single day until she finally believed him. Alexander, of course, was not happy about it. He was the antagonist in their story, the interloper who had been used as a pawn. When Lola finally broke up with him, he was furious. He spread rumors about her, tried to turn their classmates against her, tried to sabotage her reputation. But Dan and Lola were unstoppable. They had faced death, loss, and regret. They had been given a second chance, and they were not going to waste it. I fought for Lola with everything I had. I showed up at her house every day. Even when she told me to go away, I wrote her letters, read her poetry, serenaded her under her window like a lovesick fool. She pretended to be annoyed. She pretended to be unimpressed. But I knew her laughter, her smiles, the way her eyes lit up when she was happy. I knew she was falling in love with me all over again. And finally, one night, she told me she was ready. "Dan," she said, her voice soft and serious, "I'm not going to date you again just to argue for another 57 years. If we're going to do this, we're going to do it right. We're going to fight, but we're also going to forgive. We're going to argue, but we're also going to make up. And we're going to say, I love you every single day." I smiled. I think I can manage that. #### Chapter 4, The Villain's Fall. Objective commentary. The Observer's Voice. Alexander, the antagonist, did not go quietly. He was furious at being used, at being rejected by a girl he thought he had won. He couldn't accept that Lola had chosen Dan, a boy he considered weak and unworthy. He started spreading rumors about Lola, claiming she had cheated on him with Dan, that she was a liar and a manipulator. He tried to turn their classmates against her, tried to isolate her from her friends. But Dan and Lola were not alone. They had each other, and they had the support of their friends, who had seen Alexander's true colors. The showdown came at the school prom. Alexander cornered Lola on the dance floor, demanding she explain herself. Dan stepped in, his voice calm but firm. "Leave her alone, Alexander. This is between you and me." Alexander laughed, but there was a nervous edge to it. "You? You think you can fight me? You're nothing, Dan. You're weak. You're a coward. And you don't deserve her." "Maybe I don't," Dan said. "But I'm the one she chose. And I'm the one who's going to spend the rest of my life making sure she never regrets that choice." Alexander lunged at him, but Dan was ready. He had been fighting his whole life, fighting his own fears, his own pride, his own regrets. This was nothing. He stepped aside, letting Alexander stumble and fall. The crowd gasped. The cameras flashed. And Alexander, humiliated and exposed, fled the dance floor. Objective commentary. The Observer's Voice. After the prom incident, Alexander was a social pariah. His lies were exposed, his reputation destroyed. He transferred schools at the end of the year, never to be seen again. Dan and Lola, on the other hand, were inseparable. They had been given a second chance, and they had taken it. They had overcome their pride, their fears, and their regrets. They had found their way back to each other. I asked Dan once if he ever regretted the years he had wasted. He shook his head. "No," he said. "I don't regret them. Did I regret the things I didn't say? The things I didn't do, but I don't regret the time I spent with Lola. Every argument, every fight, every stubborn moment was a part of who we were, and I wouldn't trade any of it." Epilogue. The life they lived. Dan and Lola graduated high school together. They went to college, got married, and had 2 children. They argued, they laughed, they loved, and they never forgot the lesson they had learned. They never stopped saying, I love you. They grew old together, their hair turning gray, their faces lined with wrinkles. They were bickering, stubborn, and impossible, but they were also happy. They were content. They were in love. And when Lola died, old, surrounded by her family, her hand in Dan's, she smiled. You did it, Dan, she whispered. You said it every single day. I know, he said, his voice cracking. And I'll say it again, over and over, until I see you again. She closed her eyes, and she was gone. Dan lived for another decade, surrounded by the love of his children and grandchildren. He told them the story of how he and Lola had found each other, how they had been given a second chance, how they had fought for each other, how they had never stopped loving each other. And when he died, he was smiling. Final objective commentary, the observer's voice. Dan and Lola's story is a reminder that love is not always perfect. It is messy, complicated, and frustrating, but it is also the most powerful force in the world. They had been given a second chance, and they had taken it. They had learned to forgive, to communicate, to say the words they had been too afraid to say. They had built a life together, full of laughter, tears, and unconditional love. I think about them sometimes, about the 2 souls who had been separated by pride and reunited by fate. I think about the voice in Dan's head, the warning that had saved them both. And I realize that sometimes the greatest gift we can receive is the chance to do it all over again. To love, to fight, to forgive. To say the words we were too afraid to say.